in a manner, that disperses it across space and across time. And by across time, I mean into the future, so that our children and our grandchildren benefit and have better prospects. I submit that to create wealth in that manner, that is across space and across time and into the future, we must have a mindset change. We cannot continue to work and act parochially and seeming to be only interested in self or biological family and expect success in creating sustainable wealth for our countries. We have to understand that we have to build for community. Otherwise, how else can something like a social security net be constructed? We cannot continue to have such a high sense of entitlement, so much so that people exist and expect to receive salaries but do not want to put in any real work or effort. We cannot continue to use institutional resources without thinking or realizing that these are our own resources. We see people spend on procurement in ways that they wouldn't if the money was coming out of their own bank accounts. I am known in the various places I have worked for my very simple calculus for determining whether something is right or wrong. Some say it's simplistic, but it works for me. And I ask each and every one of my colleagues when they do things, whether they think they did the right thing. And that judgment for me is very straightforward. If that expenditure you made was from your own personal account, would you have done it that way? If it was your personal money that another colleague had not transferred for 6 months, would you simply sit unconcerned about when the money was coming? Or would you check on it every day? If the scholarship money that had not been transferred were for your daughter's subsistence in school, rather than for some faceless foreign student from another country in Africa, would you have let 4 months pass before interrogating the situation? If that procurement was from your personal budget, would you have inspected the goods carefully before accepting them and signing off? I have seen people order and accept computers for an office, 30 computers, that were the wrong specifications. Presumably they did so without checking. But these same people, when they go to the market to buy a tomato for a few kwacha, will pick it up, squeeze it, turn it around, squeeze it, put it down, and accuse the seller of not having good tomatoes today. So there we know how to seek value for money. And yet when we're using government, company, office resources to buy 30 computers, it's not something that we really care that much about. These are all real-life examples I've encountered in the last 3 or 4 years. And I tell colleagues something my father told me. He always used to tell me, and I didn't understand it when he started telling me. He said, you can lie to everyone else except the person you see in the mirror. You can't lie to yourself. When you're doing wrong, you know. When you're doing right, you know. And therefore, when we know we're not doing the right thing by the office, by our community, by our country, we really need to rethink the mindset that inclines us that way. So simply ask yourself that litmus test question. If it was my money, would I have been okay the way we spent it in the office? If it had been my child, would I have taken the same decision? It's a very simple question. And if your answer is, yes, I would have taken the same decision, then the worst I can say about you is, maybe you don't think things through very carefully. But if you honestly end up with an answer that is no, then you have to stand again and rethink your position on those issues. Over the last almost 32 years, I've had the good fortune of working in so many places in Africa and in the West, including as a full professor since 2001 at 5 different universities, where grooming, mentoring, training students was my job, my core job. But I want to focus on my work on the continent, and at the University of Ghana, we took over the Regional Institute for Population Studies Research Center. This is a center that the United Nations had funded for 27 years, from 1972, 72 plus 27, till 1999. And then they pulled out abruptly, suddenly, with only 6 months' notice. So the institute imploded. All the expatriate professors who were being paid by the UN left. All the foreign students from Anglophone Africa who were coming to the University of Ghana to that training program with lucrative UN fellowships left. And the place basically shriveled. I had the good fortune of being asked to try to revive it. And I tell people that one of my blessings was that at that point, my university was thinking about closing down the department. They didn't think it would survive. And so because of that, they left me to my own devices. And that really helped, because I was able to hold people accountable in ways that our public institutions frequently don't allow us to, or we think they don't allow us to. 6, 7 years later, we had a very vibrant program. Graduate students who were coming out of that program were actually publishing at a faster rate than our lecturers, and that in of itself generated its own problems. But I thought it was a good problem to have. Even before that, I was the inaugural director of the African Population and Health Research Center, APHRC, it's called, in Nairobi. That was about I think I started there about 21 years ago. And at that point, 21 years ago, there were postdoctoral fellows like Muse sitting over there, Dr. Eliazulu, who was brand new in the program. It was full of postdoctoral scholars. I was the only non-postdoctoral person in there. And I was given the job of trying to mentor and build the institute at the same time. That institute, I think, at that point had too many goals. One of them was reversing the brain drain. And so all the postdocs were African postdocs who had finished PhDs overseas, hadn't been more than 2 or 3 years since their PhD, and they thought that was the easiest time to get them to come back to the continent. Because if they stayed longer, they would get stuck there. And so the institute at Center had brought back, I think there were 13, 14 or so postdoctoral students from all over the West. But they were all 1, 2, or 3 years past their PhD, and they were expected to raise money in the ways that established centers are asked to. Something wasn't right about that calculus. Nevertheless, I think we had some luck in changing the structure of the institute and its mandate. And today, it's arguably the largest population and health research center on the continent. Again, we had to make very hard decisions about who to keep, who to let go, how the work culture should be, what we expect of people. Over the last 3 years, as Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Research at the University of Ghana, we have entirely restructured the university's system. And we've set up a system that, as you heard earlier, has increased our revenues by 1,200% over the last 3 years. We're now managing about $42.5 billion, 2018-2019 academic year figures. And there also, we've had to let people go. We've had to totally restructure. And the one thing I can say about myself, if I can say anything about myself, is the one asset I have is that I'm not afraid of anything. And it's something that I'm going to ask all of us in Africa, a posture that I'm going to ask all of us to assume. Because if you're not bold enough to try things, you're essentially just going to minimally manage what you inherited and hand over something slightly greater than the minimum that you got. We have to be bold and we have to try things. And that means we will fail sometimes. But I'm very proud of going to the Olympics 4 times and never winning a medal. I'm proud because I tried, and I kept trying, and I kept trying till the body said no more. And that is an attitude we have to develop, that we have to try to improve the lots of the people we work with and the people we work for. And the people we work for are the communities that we come from, and the children and grandchildren that are coming after us. So I've also served as the Ghana Olympic Committee President and as the Ghana Athletics President. And I've chaired quite a few boards in my young years. Beyond the AFIDEP board, which I'm very proud to lead at this moment in time. And I don't say that because we have an office here in Lilongwe. Beyond AFIDEP, I have chaired public sector boards. The Financial Intelligence Center one was probably the most challenging. I think every country has an equivalent of the Financial Intelligence Center. This is the center that deals with money laundering, deals with anti-terrorism financing, and so on and so forth. And you get into some really murky areas, and you have to be bold enough to make some really brave decisions. At one point, the president that I served, President Evans Atta Mills, John Evans Atta Mills, God rest his soul, passed away in office, told me that I needed to go and chair the board of the Export Development and Agricultural Investment Fund. EDAIF was the acronym. It's the largest agricultural fund that we had in Ghana. And when he told me that one morning, I told him, "Sir, I don't know anything about agriculture." And he said, "I know your heart. Go and use your best judgment." And the point was a really salient one, because it's really all about the heart. I tell people, go read in 1 Samuel, I think 1 Samuel 6 or 7 or 17 or somewhere in there, where it tells us that that's what we're judged by, our hearts, because it's our heart that determines our intent. If we're going to be judged by what we actually achieve, we have to understand that the outcome is not totally within our mandate or ability. If it was, the outcomes were totally within our mandate, I would have